Yes. Thank you very much. I would just want to hear from my sister from Malawi on the issue of compensation, because in Tanzanian laws we have provisions which provide for compensation, and it's usually ordered that victims be compensated. But then the challenge is, they would say, serve a sentence of 5 years imprisonment and thereafter compensate the victim a certain amount of money. Now, when the sentence is issued, normally the victims are not there. And nobody, I don't even think the prosecution would even bother to take the order and inform the victim that you've been awarded compensation of a certain amount, let alone the fact that the amount is very minimal. But when you say that the compensation has to be paid after serving the sentence, how does this victim look for the accused person after a period of 5 years, while maybe he's won on appeal, or even if he completes the sentence? You know, they would usually move prisoners from one prison to another, and you wouldn't even know when the accused is out. So how do you face this challenge? How do you make it a reality? Because when we train, we really tell people that that's just an academic exercise. If the person is awarded an order which cannot be implemented, then don't just issue it. It means that this person has to be compensated immediately, but then the accused has also got to go to prison. How does he make compensation while in prison? So that's the challenge which I would like to hear from my colleagues. How have they addressed their challenge? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very good presentations. I just wanted to pick up from that question and underscore the importance of compensation to victims of trafficking, especially sex trafficking. And the compensation should go beyond the actual monetary compensation, but should go into ensuring that the victim is assisted in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder, which is very common for most victims of sex trafficking particularly, and which most legislations don't really take that into consideration, because most legislation will talk about attaching the property of the trafficker, but can judicial officers therefore go ahead and also order for the compensation in terms of ensuring that the victim's psychosocial support is catered for through the proceeds of the crime? I think that is really important for trafficking cases.
Yes, please.
I want to talk a bit about the compensation aspect. The law in Nigeria makes specific provision for a trust fund, and where during the course of trial it is proved that the accused person acquired property, and that this property were acquired while he was in this business of human trafficking. Such property can be acquired by government and put in the trust fund. And there can be an order made specifically and it's certain amount. Immediately he's convicted that the victim should be compensated to the tune of such and such an amount. But of course, as you said, if he goes on appeal, if he wasn't guilty, then the money cannot go to the victim. So there must be some way to look for some form of compensation, both financial and emotional compensation, as our sister Anita said, to the victim. So these are issues open for everyone to discuss. But we have a way that you can actually make the order in Nigeria to say that it has been discovered that so property, such a place is forfeited to government since it's a process of crime, and it should be sold and put in the trust fund. And from there, the victim should be compensated with 10,000, whatever, a specific amount of money is given as the order.
Pinter, please.
What I find most interesting is that most of the perpetrators that we find are actually the middlemen. So when you find the middlemen guilty and you forfeit their assets, the assets that you normally get from them as proceeds of crime are very minimal. The barons, the big men behind the crime, are hardly gone after. And that is where the big money is hiding. So all the little monies that or properties that you forfeit after convictions really don't go to much, especially where you have multiple victims. So I'm really wondering, I know that like Helen said, Nigeria has the law, but how to implement that law and adequate compensation, I think it's a big problem.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. I congratulate my sisters who have presented, and I would like to share with our sisters from Malawi during their presentation. I think there was a mention about facing challenges with the poorly drafted judges, and then also facing challenges whereby only one charge is brought, and when it falls by the wayside, the perpetrator gets off scot-free. In Kenya, we have court users committees which meet on a regular basis, and they bring together all court users. And I think those are the forums whereby the judges or the judicial officers can raise issues of poorly drafted charge sheets and facing challenges on how such offenses can be prosecuted. Maybe we can share that with our sisters so that you can use that as a component in your trainings to improve on the system that you have in your place. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. From the presentation, I've picked something that I believe it affects Botswana, because we're looking at compensating the victims. And then we're looking at compensating victims of sexual exploitation where prostitution was conducted or was done. So the first issue is when you compensate or restore, or you restore or you compensate what a victim has lost, especially the medical and what the government has lost. So now when you look at the labor issues, it's easier because where the cheap labor was paid, and then you look at the market and see how much that person was could have been paid and how much was taken from them. But then, now when you look at the sexual exploitation, like I've already said, prostitution in Botswana is not legal, and there is no price that is placed for commercial sex. So then what I want to ask around is what are you going to apportion the damage that has been suffered by that victim? How are we going to compensate? What is it that you'll be looking at to compensate? I think it's something that I can learn, because we have a case before courts where a child was sexually exploited. So then when you compensate, how are we going to do it? I think it's a challenge that I believe maybe I can get assistance from this role. Thank you.
Catalina.
Aqui há o exemplo de Moçambique, em que, portanto, eu vi que referia-se, portanto, à colega Ellen, que a compensação resulta daquilo que for apreendido, tanto que é produto do tráfico. A experiência de Moçambique é diferente. De uma forma geral, a compensação ela resulta sempre daquilo que são os bens, se ficar provado que ele é responsável ou ela é responsável, portanto a pessoa é responsável pelo tráfico, são os bens dessa pessoa, independentemente de ter algum envolvimento com o crime ou não. E nos termos da lei do tráfico, os bens que são apreendidos, que é produto do tráfico, na verdade tem um outro destino, que é, portanto, os rendimentos, produtos e bens utilizados na prática do crime, de tráfico ou delas resultantes, que nos termos da presente lei revertem a favor do Estado e são aplicados em programas de prevenção e reintegração das vítimas de tráfico. E como foi dito inicialmente relativamente à apreensão dos bens, aquilo quando se diz que nós não temos dinheiro para combater o tráfico e trabalhar na prevenção, se fosse possível a apreensão desses bens, haveria dinheiro para trabalhar nesse âmbito. Portanto, no que diz respeito à compensação, vai-se buscar os bens que pertencem ou que foram adquiridos pelo agente, portanto, do tráfico. Obrigada.
Monsenhor.
Yes, the question is very important. And I think that as say, and in this statement, by the way, we can read and take one copy of the statement that was produced by the women judges in the last meeting that we have here. It's in Spanish and in English. But because it's the state to have the more important responsibility with the victims. So the question is, as do in Mexico, Rossi Orozco, convince the governors that the victims need to be in the center of the concern of the states, the different states or the general state of the nation. So the governor, in the case of Mexico, for example, give an apartment to the victims, give the possibility to study, to have a title, of course, give the possibility to arrive to have a good job, and because in the end is in part is the more important responsible of the situation of the victim is because the state or was negligent or tolerant or collaborated with the traffickers. This is the question. So is the government to need to be the first responsibility to the reinsertion of the victims in the society. This is the principle. So what could be in each state the solution? That is a different question. But the more important question is to understand, and to make understand to the governors, that the first responsibility is just the responsibility of the government, because it was the government in the end to permit and to cause this situation. Also for drugs and other things that are in relation with this.
Este es un delito global, transnacional, complejo, donde los gobiernos tienen una importante cuota de responsabilidad. Son los gobiernos, son los estados que tienen el deber legal de combatir el crimen organizado, el tráfico de personas y proteger a las víctimas, para de esta forma conseguir la paz social en el mundo, que es lo que todos anhelamos. Estos delitos de trata y de tráfico de personas, de órganos, tráfico de estupefacientes, son delitos complejos donde nadie, y mucho menos los gobiernos, pueden mirar para otro lado cuando no ser, en muchos casos, cómplices o encubridores de este delito. La droga es el primer negocio a nivel internacional más lucrativo y le sigue el tráfico de seres humanos. Y dentro del tráfico de seres humanos, en este momento estamos viendo el tráfico de niños y de niñas. Por eso decimos y sostenemos y reafirmamos que es un delito contra la humanidad. Y nosotras como juezas somos la voz autorizada para decir esto, para que ningún gobierno se haga el desentendido, en el mejor de los casos. Estos delitos ocurren por la complicidad de vastos sectores y de sectores poderosos, de sectores gubernamentales. Mucho del dinero que sostienen a estos gobiernos vienen de estos delitos, vienen del narcotráfico, vienen de la trata de personas, vienen del crimen organizado. Y ya lo dije, como juezas tenemos una doble responsabilidad, por nosotros mismos y por los demás, sobre todo por los que menos tienen, por los más pobres, por los más desfavorecidos del sistema, por los excluidos del sistema. No miremos, hermanas, para otro lado. Denunciemos y combatamos este crimen organizado. Estamos juntas y en un ambiente que es realmente inmejorable. En este ambiente que nos ha brindado la Academia Pontificia de decir estas dolorosas verdades. Muchas gracias.
Sorry, for example, and I point 8 of this declaration of women judges, creation of a system ensuring that all the victims' rights are protected, including not only the physical and moral recovery, but also the reparation and compensation of the damage they suffer. Together with the government, the justice system must implement mechanisms for the victims to have access to such reparation. The state and the judicial powers must ensure that the assets of those involved in human trafficking crimes are confiscated for the benefits of the victims. And in the point 9, is again more strong. In the process of liberating the victims and penalize the offenders or slaves of the criminals' assets should be considered, as well as the dismantling of the criminal structures and economic basis for the social reutilization of such assets, and especially for the reparation of the damages suffered by the victims. The confiscation, etc., and the government need to give to this victim all the possibility and put in the center to have the dignity and to have a normal work, etc., etc. So I think this is really very important. And of course, you need to be free of the pressure of the government to do these things. We say the things that say the Pope when he comes here. The question more important is that the judges are free to apply the law in defense of the human dignity. Thank you, sorry.
Please.
J'aimerais revenir sur un point très important et faire l'échange avec mes collègues sur le consentement de la victime. Et la possibilité, ici dans quelques pays, où la peur qu'elles vont être incriminées donc, en tant qu'auteurs d'un autre délit. Ici, j'aimerais bien rappeler du choix du législateur tunisien qui a stipulé clairement qu'il n'est pas possible de poursuivre une victime de traite, par exemple d'exploitation sexuelle, pour prostitution légale, ou par exemple une victime de travail domestique forcé qui a dépassé donc, le séjour pour un séjour illégal. Parce que ici, sinon on ne pourra pas. Les victimes, ils ont peur, ils en disent oui, on sait, même lorsqu'ils savent qu'ils sont dans une situation irrégulière, donc elles ont peur d'aller à la justice et de réclamer leurs droits. Sinon, si on ne fait pas ça, la cohérence dans les lois nationales, je crois que j'ai pris cette remarque de la crainte de quelques collègues qui n'ont pas encore des lois spécifiques en la matière, qui se posent la question. Mais il y a une réponse claire. Notre réponse, elle est déjà prise de la Convention de Palerme. Et je crois que les lois nationaux, sinon pas ça, on ne pourra pas vraiment être efficace pour la lutte contre la traite. Il faut vraiment que la victime ait un minimum d'aide et d'assistance légale, juridique. Et il faut qu'elle sache, il faut que aussi, la loi aussi tunisienne, on aura demain peut-être la possibilité de plusieurs, d'en parler explicitement, mais on prévoit aussi, nous, par exemple, un hébergement convenable lors de la procédure, une assistance psychologique, une assistance matérielle, un accès aux soins médicaux. Tout ça, si ça n'existe pas, tout ça, donc la personne, elle va se demander, mais moi, je vais me jeter là toute seule dans un combat, dans un pays, elle est étrangère, c'est une situation vulnérable, vraiment vulnérable, de se trouver parfois, elles n'ont pas la langue, comment elles vont s'adresser. Donc, tous ces obstacles vont agrandir la peur et le courage de pouvoir en parler de la traite. C'est pour cela qu'il faut que ces lois nationales, elles vraiment précisent, elles sont claires là-dessus pour pouvoir, pour vraiment réellement combattre ce fléau. Sinon, ça n'a pas de sens. On pourra avoir des lois, mais ces petits détails, s'ils n'existent pas, on ne pourra pas avoir un fruit à notre travail. Voilà, merci.
Je pense que la meilleure solution, c'est la loi nordique, le modèle nordique. Et l'application de le modèle nordique, that toujours nous avons en France, parce que justement en France, non seulement pénalise les consommateurs, mais aussi prend l'argent des trafiquants pour les donner à les victimes. So, je pense que ça, c'est... Je ne sais pas si en Afrique, il était quelques pays qui aujourd'hui a des modèles nordiques. Ça, c'est la question.
have the same in the Tunisian law, the confiscation, yeah. On a la même chose. Et d'ailleurs, on est vraiment très clos aux conventions du Conseil d'Europe sur la lutte contre la traite des êtres humains. On a beaucoup appris. C'est une loi vraiment récente, mais on a pris l'expérience. On a vu donc peut-être les modèles les plus avancés et les plus détaillés pour faire une bonne loi. Mais est-il, toujours la question, une bonne législation à elle seule suffit-elle pour combattre réellement la traite? Parce que c'est pas que la législation, je crois. Hein. Voilà.
Bon, législation est quelque chose. Mais, quand même, je ne sais pas si vous entendez bien la question, parce que les modèles nordiques, pour la première fois en l'histoire, pénalisent pas les victimes qui ne sont pas plus criminelles, comme tous les cas précédents, mais les criminels, c'est les consommateurs. Alors, ça, c'est la question. Vous savez ça? Bon. C'est bien que vous montrez votre loi, hein? Merci.
I'm sorry to come back again, but I think there's a difference between the judges enforcing the law, whether the law is good or bad, but the judges enforcing the law, and the enforcement agencies enforcing the judgments of the courts. In Nigeria, we have a lot of good laws. We have a lot of laws that make room for compensations, reparation, restoration, rehabilitation, de-radicalization. We have all the laws in place. The courts pronounce the right judgments, but it is not the courts that enforce the judgments. So the problem is not whether the judges have the courage as per Resolution 8 and 9 in that last judges' conference. The judges have the courage, the judges have been doing it, but whether the executive now that is responsible for enforcing those judgments have the willpower to enforce those judgments. Because if you make an order of confiscation of property or proceeds of crime, you confiscate them to the government. You don't confiscate them and give it to the victim. Then you now make an assessment of what the victim is entitled to, and you make that order as a judge, and you've done your job. But you find that the executive now, who is responsible for enforcing that order of court, may be reluctant to do so. So this is another area where we can maybe learn from other jurisdictions what they've been able to do. But I think we in Nigeria, that is the problem we'd probably just have.
Please. Merci. C'est juste pour dire qu'au Bénin, c'est pratiquement le même problème qu'au Nigeria. On a parfois les meilleurs tests, nous avons même une loi qui prévoit l'aide judiciaire. Mais dans la mise en œuvre, il n'y a pas l'accompagnement de l'État pour le faire. Et le juge, ne devant pas prendre parti pour l'une des parties au procès, est obligé de faire preuve de retenue d'indépendance, de se prononcer sur ce qui est demandé, mais pour l'exécution de la décision, le juge n'intervient plus. Et c'est là qu'on a les pires difficultés par rapport à la question des victimes et autres. Merci. S'il vous plaît, j'ai oublié, je voudrais ajouter aussi que chez nous, ceux qui votent les lois, les députés, sont majoritairement des hommes et c'est des gens très, très machos. Donc, pour les amener parfois à discuter, à voter une loi en faveur de la femme, ce n'est pas assez facile. Donc, une loi, par exemple, pour confisquer les biens de l'auteur au profit des victimes, nous n'avons pas encore une loi pareille et ça va être encore un peu difficile par rapport à l'état de nos représentants à l'Assemblée nationale. Je vous remercie.
Je ne sais pas, je pourrais vous lire l'article 16 de notre loi qui stipule que le tribunal, dans le troisième paragraphe, le tribunal peut ordonner la confiscation de tout ou partie des biens, meubles ou immeubles, et avoirs financiers appartenant aux condamnés s'il a été établi leur utilisation pour les besoins de financement de personnes, organisations ou activités en rapport avec les infractions prévues par la présente loi. Donc ça, c'est une toute petite partie, mais il est très explicite. Il donne plusieurs possibilités de recouvrement. Voilà.
Ça, c'est une part très importante. Mais l'autre question, c'est si la victime s'est criminalisée ou c'est criminaliser les consommateurs. Ça, c'est l'autre chose.
Je crois qu'on reviendra demain. C'est mieux pour garder un peu où vous voulez que je vous réponde. Donc la victime, par la loi, lorsqu'elle est, par exemple, victime même en prenant un exemple, d'une exploitation, par exemple, pour nous, dans la prostitution forcée à l'étranger. Il y avait des cas, des femmes qui sont revenues de pays, bon, par chance, elles ont pu revenir. Et là, c'est posé la question. Ces femmes, lorsqu'elles sont parties pour un contrat de travail et elles sont trouvées que c'est pas, elles sont parties pour être infirmières, par exemple. Elles sont trouvées travailler dans un casino et extra. Donc là, c'était la question du consentement. Mais réellement, lorsqu'on leur a confisqué les papiers, alors qu'est-ce qu'ils ont fait, les trafiquants? Oui, tu voulais revenir, je te donne ton passeport, il faut que tu m'amènes telle somme. Et tu travailles pour l'avoir. Et tu n'as qu'à ce travail pour pouvoir que je te restitue. Là, c'est pas un consentement, c'est pas une volonté réelle. Donc ces gens-là, une fois, mais par chance, il y a des gens qui sont revenus, et c'est grâce à ces femmes-là qu'on a pu découvrir tout un réseau, qu'on a pu démanteler un réseau de trafic, et on a pu savoir qu'il y avait des agences même qui préparaient des contrats de travail à l'étranger pour quelques pays du Golfe, et puis ça se passait des horreurs. Et puis encore, on a un autre obstacle, peut-être culturel pour nous, c'est que est-ce que c'est possible d'en parler lorsqu'on est victime, et surtout de plus ou moins quelque chose qui touche à la pudeur là. Il y a des femmes, ou bien elles se suicident, ou bien elles ont honte, elles ne veulent plus revenir, elles ne veulent plus affronter le réel. Donc c'est...
Oui, je comprends ça. Mais la question c'est combien de consommateurs, combien de personnes que nous considérons non pas trafiquants, mais consommateurs, c'est-à-dire personnes qui vont contracter à une victime de prostitution sans impression en votre pays. Combien vous avez impressionné?
Je n'ai pas compris, impressionné.
Combien de personnes vous avez mis en prison?
Ah, en prison, emprisonné,
oui. Ok. Ça, c'est la question.
Oui.
Pas trafiquants, mais les personnes, des hommes qui vont pour chercher ces femmes.
Oui, on a des condamnations, mais on a c'est-à-dire, ils ne sont pas revenus, c'est-à-dire on n'a pas pu vraiment, il y a des sentences, mais il n'y a pas réellement quelqu'un qu'on a pu attraper, parce qu'ils ont su qu'ils sont demandés et qu'il y a donc des peines lourdes, mais mais on a réellement quelqu'un qui a été capturé en prison, pas encore, pour cette affaire-là. Donc je sais bien on a pu identifier, on a pu savoir ces gens-là, même c'était une femme, mais ils ont tous pris la fuite.
Pourquoi les Suédois les peuvent attraper?
Ouais.
Ça, c'est la question. Hein.
Ouais.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much. I just want to share what the Zambian Anti-Human Trafficking Act says on the issue of compensation to the victim of human trafficking. You know, in addition to any punishment which the court may impose in respect of an offense under the Act, the court can also order that the victim be compensated, and this can be in relation to damage to or the loss of destruction of property, including money. This may also be for physical, psychological, or other injury, or loss of income or support resulting from the commission of the offense. And in assessing the compensation that a person convicted of any offense under the Act may be ordered to pay, the court must take into account the means of the offender. And under the Act, the court may also, in addition to any punishment which it may impose in respect of the offense under the Act, and in addition to any other compensation to a victim in terms of this provision under the Act, upon application by the prosecutor, it can also make an order for the state to be compensated of any amount in terms of expenses that were incurred in relation to this victim of human trafficking. It is also interesting to note that where a person is required to pay compensation, the court may enforce the payment of compensation, whether in whole or in part, by allowing the accused person to pay that compensation in installments. And if money is due to that person, for example, under a contract of employment, that amount can be deducted from the salary or wages that are due to this perpetrator of human trafficking. The court may also vary the conditions and installments according to which compensation is to be made, and the court may also, on good cause shown, review any decision that it has made on the making of compensation and replace it with a new order. And interesting again, where a person is required to pay compensation, the court making the order may issue a warrant which is directed to the sheriff or the court, authorizing the sheriff to recover the amount of the compensation by attachment and sale of any property that belongs to the perpetrator of human trafficking. And the amount which may be recovered in terms of this section shall be sufficient to recover or to cover, in addition to the amount of the compensation, the cost and expenses or the warrant, and of any attachment and sale of the property. So you can see that under the Zambian law, you know, the court has discretion and jurisdiction in terms of compensation for victims of human trafficking. I think the only challenge we have in Zambia is that we don't have so many cases of human trafficking that are being prosecuted. Otherwise, the law is in favor of the victim of human trafficking. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you. You forgive me, I have a cold, so I may break off when I'm coughing. But Monsignor Sondo asked about the Nordic model, whether victims are penalized under some of our systems. In Uganda, under the Prevention of Trafficking in Persons Act, we have a provision that a victim of trafficking shall be legally recognized as such and shall not be penalized for any crime committed as a direct result of her or his trafficking. So we have that provision, but that is not a problem. Usually when cases are investigated as trafficking in persons offenses, we observe this provision, because we realize more often than not that our victims are, in a way, complicit in participating in commission of crimes, forging documents, they do this. But because of this provision, we overlook that, we treat them as victims and proceed against the actual perpetrators. But that is not the problem. The problem is that the management and handling of trafficking cases in Uganda has been a bit specialized. We have a team in police that handles trafficking cases, in prosecution, and some judges. So a few people are actually aware of these offenses. But majority, your average investigator and prosecutor is not very aware of these trafficking offenses. So, for example, if you find it's a ring of prostitution, we've come to realize that most cases, these are victims of trafficking. They've been got from other places with offers, promises of employment, and then when they are brought to the city, they are instead used for sexual exploitation, for prostitution. Unfortunately, when our police gets this information, they will go for what I will call low-hanging fruits. They will go and round up a number of prostitutes, prefer charges, they will take the file to a prosecutor who will sanction a case of prostitution. So in a way, we're not looking beyond what is on the surface. We're just scratching, and we end up prosecuting the victims who would actually lead us to the perpetrators, the people who have brought them into these crimes. So if we looked beyond what is on the surface to find out how these crimes are committed, and to realize that some of the offenses we see on the face of it are just the, what can I call them, are just a representation of a bigger, deeper problem, then we'll be able to tackle that problem. And that, I think, is a theme that has been running across. The fact that there is need for training. We need to understand what trafficking is in its entirety, to understand that it's not just a person. On average, a person who understands trafficking as getting, for example, in Ugandan context, get a girl, promise her a job in the United Arab Emirates, and then they are taken over there, mistreated. That is trafficking. But there is a bigger problem within our countries, domestic trafficking, where these victims end up in prostitution and forced labor within our countries. So if we understand that there are crimes committed within our communities and find a way of linking them, understanding the phenomenon. My colleagues in Ghana have been talking, in Kenya, whoever talks, it's the same problem. When my colleague in Ghana was talking, was it Christine? It's like she was giving the scenario of Uganda. So we have to understand that these crimes are manifested in the same way. These people have a certain mode of operation. We understand the operation, and then we understand how to tackle the problem in its entirety. I thank you.
Yes, Mary and Fiona.
Can I say something? Nordic model not make distinction between trata and prostitution, because prostitution in itself is a form of slave. So when it's prostitution, could be trata, could be not trata, but is in itself and a form of slave.
I just wanted to reply on some of the issues on compensation. I think we had a response from Nigeria that helped to respond to some of the issues, and Zambia as well. But I was going to say, for my sister in Tanzania, the practical challenge she has is that if you order compensation and you say that this compensation is to be collected after the person has been sentenced, where will the money come from, and what happens if they appeal? Is this an academic exercise? Well, basically, the challenge is that when we are in court during sentencing, I think most of us have provisions that enable the court to get additional information which we don't use. What we've been training our magistrates on, and this provision is in our Criminal Procedure and Evidence Code, and I'm sure most of us have a similar provision. During sentencing, the court is supposed to ask for additional evidence. And this additional evidence helps you to get a broader view of the picture. So for instance, if we had functioning probation systems in our country, there should be a court probation officer, who at the time of sentencing should be able to tell the court about the accused person's means, how much money he has, what assets he has, so that when the court is sentencing, it has a full picture to say, okay, it should also hear on the impact of the offense on the victim. We never get victim impact reports. I don't know about, I mean, I was recently in Tanzania and they agreed with me that this wasn't happening. So I don't know about the other countries in here. But in order for you to effectively sentence and take into account the needs of the victim, we need to be using our power to call for additional evidence. It can come from the prosecution if we have no probation to say, look, can you address me on what the accused person's means are? The court can even ask the victim to come in or make a statement in writing. The court can take this into account to say, you know, ever since I was trafficked, I'm no longer sleeping. I have night sweats. I am too afraid to go out. I need this kind of treatment and that kind of treatment. This should tell the court what the victim needs. And the assessment on the accused person should tell the court what the accused can afford to pay. So, you know, you don't want to sentence somebody to, you know, you don't want to order compensation from somebody who can't afford to pay. That would be an exercise in futility. So we don't have the problem of waiting until the sentence is served before a person can pay compensation. If you know how much he's earning, then you should be able to say this is what this person can afford. Get that person to pay that compensation before. In Malawi, we also have the national, we also have a national fund for trafficking in persons. But the funny thing about this fund is, for the longest time, it was only in operational in the statute books. The Ministry of Finance had not set up that account. So in one case, a magistrate actually forfeited assets from a trafficked person and says this money should go into the fund, and there was no fund. That money disappeared. If we do have functioning funds, that money can also be used to pay compensation. It doesn't always have to come from the accused person. And I looked at a lot of legislation around Africa, and many of us have trafficking in persons funds. We should be able to get money and say, look, I've received information about the victim's needs. This money should come from the trafficking in persons funds. One issue that I would also like to throw caution on is the issue of double punishment. If the sentence is very high and then you also order compensation, you know, we have to look at it as a balancing act when we're sentencing. Are we, you know, we're getting a lot of money from him, he's spending lots of time in prison, so the delicacy is how do we balance this sentencing function? I think my colleague also has something to say, so I won't say too much.
Thank you, Fiona.
Yes.
Thank you. Mine is not on the compensation. It's a question, actually. This is the first time I'm attending this forum, so I wanted to find out a very basic principle. What is the foundation upon which we're proceeding when we speak of protecting, punishing consumers and not the victims? What criteria are we using to identify the consumers? I say this just to highlight an example. I've heard of instances where legal prostitution has bouncers outside the door. So when customers are going, these are put there allegedly to protect the prostitutes in case of violent customers. And yet illegal prostitution rings that keep people in slavery also use bouncers outside the door. These ones are to threaten the person not to scream or alert the users that they are in this in a forced manner. So how do we tell? How do we, is prostitution, are we advancing a legal prostitution or illegal prostitution? That one, I thought if we have to contribute and move forward, we need to be a bit more clear what this forum on that is. So I hope that as one of the distinguished participants of the panel would be able to clarify that point. Thank you.